Hi, Olivia. I thought it'd be easier just to give you some feedback using my video. So, your question is, how do I approach this idea of teaching him about regular and irregular we're talking about simple past tense forms. And understand if you go to your grammar, the grammar text that we're using, you will find out there are multiple forms for past tense. So your goal really is to have him use and understand these past tense forms. But really, underneath all of this, you want to help him look closely at words, understand that there are differences, and analyze in some way what those differences are, and be able to use them consistently in oral communication. You want to be able to read them. You want him to be able to write and spell them correctly. So there are a variety of kind of targets in here, but this really matches the Common Core and it works well for all of them. Um, and so the idea is that you need to start thinking about benchmarks. We talked about this in the language class, and that is you're going to break it down into some steps that you may follow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or you may kind of work at each of them in different ways according to kind of a sequence. And so again, what you're teaching him with this is not just about simple past tense, but you're also teaching him a way to look and analyze words when you even get into more difficult things. But the benchmarks I thought about was he will be able to read and sort verbs into categories, past and present. So just even that big concept, you already started that. And so I think you're maybe beyond that, but make sure he understands. Past means before and present means something he's currently doing. And we're talking about verbs. It's not a bad idea to use the word verb and pair it with action words. And then the other is to read and sort past tense words that kind of follow these regular rules, ed or d, and those are two different things, but that kind of fits into a category, and then other. And that he recognizes that there are different things happening. You already kind of started that as well. The second benchmark I thought about will be able to observe and explain. Explain is the key sort of verb that you want to see what he does. What changes in a word from present and creating the past. And being able to talk about the fact that we added a dd or we added a d, but then we also, these vowels changes. This changed in kind of getting these words, and these look really different. So his ability to talk about and explain what happens is important. It means he has to know what a vowel is and what a consonant is, and so make sure and check that he knows what those are. A third benchmark would be to read and sort and spell verbs into the different categories. And I created 4 based on, this is a website that I give you the web address to, which really creates 4 different categories. Those that just add a D, those that add ed, but that includes some words where you double the consonant and add ed, past tense, where you change vowels, and then past tense where you change more. Something else happens. It's more than just a vowel change. O-U-G-H-T is an example. And then that he will be able to change in his through the air communication, oral communication, verbs from present tense to past tense. So he has to be able to think. If you give him buy and you want him to change it to past tense, maybe you do that in a sentence, that he can actually say bought and spell bought. So, and then identify in oral and in writing past tense forms that are incorrect. So you want the category where he recognizes what's correct, but you also want the category where he recognizes it's wrong. So these are all benchmarks, and they just give you different ways to help organize instruction. You would identify this, and it says frequently occurring, this for second grade, which is what he's in, frequently occurring irregular verbs. So we're not talking about every irregular verb, the really odd ones. We're talking about frequently occurring. I do give you a list here, a website of common simple past tense verbs. And so maybe you draw from that. And then the ESL page that I refer you to talks about those categories. And it does help to think in categories because that has to do with analyzing and understanding some patterns. He has to see some of the patterns. My guess is he knows a lot of these. And really, so for some words, it's just having him recognize what's different and tell you about what's different and be able to spell them. For some, it really is learning, oh my gosh, this is what changes. I didn't know that. So I'm suggesting you might do a little pretest, a baseline pretest. And it may be that Sandy has some information about what words he knows and what he doesn't. But one way to do this would be to take from that list of words and ask him, this is your data form, ask him to change a present tense form to a past tense form. And you take words, 2 words, representative words from each of the categories, D, ED, and where you have one word where you have to double the consonant and add ED. A change in vowel, maybe one that changes 1 vowel and one that changes 2 vowels. And then what was the last category? Oh, something that really changes. So from buy to bought, or some other, take one example there and then another example. And you tell him the word in the present tense and you say, I'd like you to tell me how you would change this word to say something you did in the past. And maybe you give him a sentence. I buy cookies, like now, I'm doing it right now, I'm paying for it. What if I want to say last week and then see if he can come up with a word. And again, you're kind of incorporating, and I think this has to become part of what you do to help him understand past tense, the phrases last week. And so if you can do that with representative words, 10 is all, do that next week, you'll find out possibly where he's having some problems. And then you can kind of focus, which of these benchmarks really are you going to kind of focus on? And then I would continue sort of what you're doing in terms of kind of breaking it up into an experience. You don't have to make cookies every week. That's a nice one to do, and it gave you a good set of words to work with. But sometimes maybe it's a conversation about a topic. Again, could it be the World Series or something he's interested in? And that gives you the words that you want to work on. And then I would also draw words from this list of words. So don't only rely on the words from the experience. That is where you're going to get him to talk about and use it through the air. The other thing I would do is I would create a word bank. And you started with some words where you had the past tense form. On the other side, I would put the present tense form. And then I would begin to use these word cards to review, to begin to sort, to teach him the rules, categories that you are teaching him about past tense form. And those become sort of they become sort of a source of materials for you to begin to do some very focused activities on past tense. So you did an experience, you might do a review of the words that you did from last week in that very first part. Then you might introduce your topic and the verbs and have the conversation about and make the distinction between past and present. It may be that that's where you talk about what changes. Then you might do a sorting activity of some of the new verbs that you got from your conversation, and you may add some of them from the list. Do sorting. There are lots of different ways he can correct a verb. He can change it from past to present. There are lots of ways to approach it. And then you might do sort of a drill activity at the end. And then do the writing of the sentence, or maybe you do the writing of the sentence right after you do the experience. I know I'm getting a little confusing, but I'm hoping you can kind of sort this out and understand that teaching grammar is complicated, and so you're not going to be able to teach him every single past tense form for every single verb. You're going to have to teach him how some of the general rules, give him some good representative examples, give him some good practice on using them in written language and in oral communication through the air, and then you're going to get more and more complex. But this is really about simple past, and that seems to be what you're giving him, some rules that he can, and some ways to analyze words that help him then when he gets to more complex things. So I hope this helps. If you want to send your lesson plan to me ahead of time, I'm happy to look at it for you. So I think you're doing great. Just this is not as transparent or easy as it appears, right? It always gets more complicated. So good luck. If you have any questions, let me know. And again, I would look at your lesson plan ahead of time if you wanted to send it to me.